Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. If your kids are younger than that, please use the YouTube Kids app.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. We have 2 extra scary stories to jump into, but before we do, I would be remiss if I did not point out that today's episode is executive produced by C. Donahue. Thank you, C. Donahue. We couldn't do it without you. If you too would like to become a Scary Stories executive producer, just join our very affordable paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. This story we're about to tell you could have happened to any of us. We all allow ourselves to become distracted by work and entertainments. We can go years without actually being awake through even 1 minute of each of our days. We can become just like the guy who sent us this story, so dazed and in our own little world that we can be right next to the Dogman itself and not even realize it. Get comfortable, because we're about to tell you a little tale entitled Dogman Tried to Climb in My Window. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have had one encounter with a cryptid in my life, and it was Dogman. The thing is, I ran into him about 200 yards from my house, and since then, I no longer feel safe in my own neighborhood or home. This was 3 years ago, and I've never seen the thing since. I've never heard stories from anyone else around here about seeing it either, and I haven't even heard anything that sounds like a wolf in the night. Well, besides the 2 neighbors' dogs, and I recognize their howls by now. Everything points to this encounter being a strange fluke that would be very unlikely to repeat itself, but try explaining that to my nerves. I'm really not the same person anymore since I took that walk in the woods that evening. My girlfriend had just moved out of the home about a month earlier, and the reality of the debt that the house had gotten me into began to sink in. I couldn't afford to sell it until I had paid off more of it, as the property was my collateral for other loans I had to pay back as well. This was supposed to be something we bought together, and she kept telling me that she would pay me back after I made the initial investments. She gave me excuses like she said she needed more time to liquefy or whatever. She was just buying time until she was in a better position to dump me. She thought it was funny, the situation she was leaving me in. So, on that night, I decided that if I was stuck with this house, I would at least enjoy what it was costing me so much to own. I would go for a walk on my land. I would enjoy a bit of the forest in the evening, then come back inside before it got truly dark out there. I just wanted a change of scenery, a fresh perspective. I wanted to restore my sense of gratitude and wonder, and I needed some fresh air before I went back to banging my head against the wall and trying to fix the mess I had made of my life. What I got instead was a list of new traumas and stress reactions to nurse. When I think back on how I first noticed the Dogman in the woods, I'm never sure how long he had actually been there before I saw him. It was almost as though he were jumping backward when he leaped out onto the dirt path in front of me, as though he had expected me to see him sooner and stop walking. I'm not sure I'm explaining it correctly, but I got the impression he had been trying to get my attention for a while, but that I was too lost in my thoughts about what seemed important to me, and I wasn't even aware that I was under threat from a kind of carnivore they don't list in the field guides. And when I really think back on it, I had been hearing something off in the trees to my left. I just figured it was some animal, and I kept on walking. Those of us who live in suburbia rarely have respect for the potential danger of our surroundings. We're so used to manicured lawns and cement pools that we even assume all our wilderness area is tame. I suppose that assumption usually proves to be correct, but once in a while, nature reverts to itself, whether you're paying attention to it or not. When the creature leaped awkwardly onto the dirt path, I didn't have any clue as to what I was seeing. I remember giving a short, frightened shout and jumping up, holding my hands in an extremely ineffectual and silly defensive way. It was how a child would react to danger. I was feeling so sorry for myself over my emotional heartbreaks that I neglected to be aware of actual physical dangers right in my own vicinity. Once I saw that Dogman, I could smell him too. It was just what you would expect him to smell like a wet dog that rolled in his own poo. From the look of his matted fur, I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what the idiotic thing did. Now, I ask you, how could something that smelled so extreme and so nasty have been wandering around in the woods just to my left without me reacting to it? I know I heard it but disregarded the sounds, assuming it was something harmless. Did I also smell the thing, but subconsciously file the information under unimportant? If so, how did I, or how could anyone, become so denatured? On your channel, you describe Dogman sightings a lot, so your audience probably already knows what I'm talking about when I say a Dogman jumped out onto the path. This was something I instantly thought of as a Dogman. It wasn't like I wondered if that's what it might be. It looked like one of the creatures from that foreign werewolf movie. What was that called? Dog Soldiers, I think? It looked like one of those. It was standing on its hind legs, and it had a mane of dark hair flowing down its shoulders and upper back. This was a top-heavy kind of a thing, and it stood much taller than it had any right doing. Its legs were so long, its hips must have been up near my chest. It stood up straight, but bent forward, showing off its long teeth and sharp-looking claws at the end of endless front limbs, which it held in the air in front of it. Walking on its hind legs freed up the front arms to be used as weapons, and the creature seemed well adapted to survival as a predator. I know that my instinctive reaction to it jumping out in front of me was not to throw it a bone and pet it. My reaction was to surrender to this alpha hunter. Every atom and every impulse of my earthly self at once understood that we were in the presence of something far above us on the food chain. The creature's cruel eyes told me to give up and make it easier for both him and me. I had to resist his will and my own desire to just give up. I hate to say it because I might only cause you to see me as shallow, but what broke me from the Dogman's spell was that I flashed on my ex-girlfriend and how she would laugh to hear that a dog ate me for dinner one night. Oh, all the jokes she would tell about me at my expense. She'd probably come to my funeral and tell the stories there. I know it may make me seem like a little jerk to you, but the idea that it would annoy my ex-girlfriend if I were to survive and prosper gave me an extra shot of adrenaline and broke me out of feeling sorry for myself. I took off for the house, running as hard as I could. The dog seemed to think this was a game we were playing, and he barked loudly as he literally ran rings around me. He was on all fours now, bounding around as though he were welcoming his master home half the time, and barking a little too close to my face at other times. The thing was having fun, but it also wanted to keep reminding me how much larger it was than I was, and how much danger I was now in. I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to get into my house without also letting the huge canine in with me. I needed to get a little distance between myself and him if I was going to have a chance to slip inside. Rather than heading directly toward the house, I slowed down to a walk and headed toward our big gate, allowing the Dogman to romp around me, circling. There was a large gate between the buildings on my property used for business and my personal home. It's 10 feet tall with barbed wire on top. I was hoping I could get that dogman on the other side of that fence, then beat it back toward my back door and get inside. That's basically how I did it. I just walked nonchalantly over to the gate, opened it, politely allowed the big dog through first. Then I slammed that gate shut and raced back toward the house, fully aware that my life might depend on me exerting maximum effort in those few seconds until I was back inside. It felt like 2 hours were slowly ticking by as I heard the chain link fence rattling violently behind me, and I knew that dogman would be over the top in a matter of seconds. I felt as though I was using oxygen and energy faster than I could replenish them, and that I was going to either pass out before I got inside or get caught by that thing. One look behind me as I saw the 4 feet of the dog land unceremoniously and clumsily on the dirt, raising a cloud of dust as they did so. I screamed at the top of my lungs and basically berserker moded myself back into that house. I feel like everybody is allowed, once in your life, to exceed all expectations anyone could ever have had of you, at least for one brief but significant moment. I think I used mine up, getting back into that house, unlocking the door behind me, just as the dogman slammed hard into it. I thought the wooden door was going to crack open, but the dogman lost interest in it and instead raced over to an open window near the door. When I saw the direction he was headed in, I tried to beat him there. Before I could reach it, though, I heard the strange sound of a wolf-headed monster tearing a screen off a window, using only its teeth. I began closing the window as the dogman reached his massive head inside. I slammed the window down on his head, and I had the unfortunate effect of accidentally locking his head in place. You have to understand, the jaws and skull of this thing were much larger than a typical dog. As I said, it was top-heavy, like a furry tyrannosaur with extra long arms and legs. Its snout was longer than the creatures in the Dog Soldiers movie, but it was top-heavy like them. With the creature's head stuck in my window, I went to get my baseball bat or something else I could use for defense. By the time I got back to the window, the dogman was succeeding in pulling his head out of the finger trap, and I slammed that window down, locking it quickly. I ran around the house, similarly locking windows all the time, knowing that glass is easily breakable, especially to a creature as large as that one. As I was upstairs locking windows, I kept expecting to hear the sound of glass breaking down below. It never came. When I went back downstairs, everything was the same as I had left it. Cautiously peering out the windows, I could see no sign of the creature anywhere. The animal that had been willing to bite a screen off a window was unwilling to break glass to get inside. I can't explain why. Maybe it was just a cumulative thing. Like, first you made me take the screen off and now I gotta break the glass? Forget you, I'll go eat a squirrel instead or something. I can joke about it, but I don't think I'll ever feel safe in this part of the world ever again. 3 years have passed, and I feel like I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe soon I'll be in a position to sell this house and this land and move far away from here. As much as I love the beauty of nature, I think I'd have a much easier time of it if I could move to a place where they don't have upright walking canids. My mind and my nerves have never been the same since the night that Dogman tried to climb inside my window. We'll be right back with another all-new Dogman story right after this important word from PQ Ribber.
You know what time is coming soon, don't you? The day of the wearing of the green skin. I'm inviting you to me St. Patrick's Day Dogman Party. The one and only Dr. Death St. Patrick's Day Scary Story Special. An extra long episode, and only us ghouls and ghosts and deceased individuals are invited. Oh, all right. You seem cool. You can come too. It all happens here on the Scary Stories NYC channel, Tuesday, March 17th. Feel free to arrive early. All my other guests are late.
I only noticed Dogman because my TV broke. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a really weird kind of Dogman story that happened to me. In fact, it's still ongoing, as I'll explain later on. Ever since my wife left me 8 years ago because of my overworking, I've only had my workload at my job double, while my pay has remained the same. I hadn't realized that I had devolved into a zombified and robotic couch potato and cog in the machine until one night when my TV set went on the blink. My robotic reaction was to turn to my laptop to continue binge watching whatever I had been told would be fashionable for me to binge watch. But then, my zombie machine brain slowly awoke, and I remembered that I had left my laptop at work because it was rendering a large file, and I wanted to go home. The horror. No corporate-produced and approved infotainment to deaden my pain and dull my mind. What else could one do with their evening? I eyed my 3 bookcases left over from the 1980s. Most of the books belonged to my ex-wife. That's how over books are, I realized. She hadn't even taken any of them with her when she moved out. Well, I tried to remember the sense of wonder I used to feel entering a library or a bookstore. All these information storage units, all these different perspectives and paradigms, all waiting to explain themselves to me. These days, the idea of something as large and heavy as your standard dead tree-style book containing only 400 or 500 pages of text information makes them seem impractical and bizarre. We all knew this would happen too. Star Trek told us so as far back as the 1960s. In the future, according to the prophet Roddenberry, people will read off of screens, some on desks, some handheld. An object the size of a book needs to be able to convey far larger amounts of information in order to justify its own existence here in the future. Unless, that is, the TV goes out. Then, suddenly, each of those books start to remind you of how mesmerizing they had once seemed. I scanned the shelves, trying to remember which of the books I had been anxious to read back in the day, but had never gotten around to. Probably one of my ex-wife's books, but not one that might remind me of her. I grabbed at a title that seemed to be misspelled, Coincidence by Robert Anton Wilson. It was a Falcon Press book, and they did have a lot of misspelled words in them generally, but I could tell that this title was spelled that way on purpose. Wilson was referring to the dance of synchronicity, or seemingly meaningful coincidence. I sat down on the couch by the window, looking out on my dark backyard, and I did a trick from back in the day. I closed my eyes, and with my left hand, I'm right-handed, I randomly chose a spot inside the book and pointed at a paragraph with my finger before opening my eyes. What I got was Wilson quoting a paragraph from Philip K. Dick's book Valis. The passage was this: Apollonius of Tyana, writing as Hermes Trismegistus, said, "That which is above is that which is below." By this he meant to tell us that our universe is a hologram, but he lacked the term. Wilson then quoted James Joyce referring to the previous quote. According to Joyce, quote, The tasks above are as the flasks below, saith the emerald canticle of Hermes. The universe is a hologram. One unique quality of a hologram is that if you smash it into 1,000,000 pieces, each of those 1,000,000 pieces contains the entire image. The entire hologram is present in every part of the hologram. In other words, the entire universe exists within each of us, and, in a sense, each and every one of us is the entire universe. I was stunned by how modern a notion that was and how old the book was that I had gotten it from. Not only that, but it was being quoted from an even earlier source. What were the chances I would poke my finger blindly into this particular information storage unit out of all of them stored in this house and find something that's commonly talked about in this time and still thought of as a cutting-edge kind of a conversation? It was an interesting moment in time to have been drawn out of electric slumber programmed from the top of society and to so quickly be sucked into some fairly esoteric ways of thinking. How very different our world can become depending on what we choose to focus our attention on. And then, in the next instant, my attention was once again focused not on the complete universe existing within myself, but on the imminent threat on my person from without. I forgot about the infinite wisdom existing inside, and I fell back into fear because I heard a howling sound coming from out in that darkness outside my window. The framed glass next to me had gone from a nice way for me to look out on the serene little patch of land I owned to something I was looking through in abject horror. You see, that howl sounded like it came from right outside, but I couldn't see anything out there at all. Instantly, all thoughts of anything else evaporated as I felt a strong need to identify the source of that deep, bellowing howl. It didn't sound like it came from a coyote. It sounded like it came from something large. If bears howled, then I would say it was a bear howling, but only canines make this sort of sound as far as I know. And I never heard a dog with a chest large enough to have produced such a deep and mournful cry. It really shook me up, as I'd lived in that house around 15 years by that point, and I had never heard such a sound before. Then I realized I hadn't spent a night with the TV turned off before either. Maybe that sound always happened, and maybe I was just too lost in watching the latest programming to hear what was happening right outside my own window. It almost felt as though I needed to have that realization, that little epiphany, before I could be granted what happened next. It was almost like the source of the howling was waiting until I was aware or awake enough before it would let me see it. And oh, did I see it. Walking calmly from behind one patch of trees to behind another, the Dogman was fully visible in profile for about 3 or 4 seconds. It walked very upright and tall like a man. It had a tail which had longer fur on it than the rest of the body. The fur appeared to be black, but with reddish lips. I was seeing it in very dim lighting, so that's really just a guess. It had a long snout and was panting, with its tongue hanging out. It reminded me a bit of Lassie from TV, but it was darker colored than that, and the legs were massive, like tree trunks. I don't know if it had eye shine, as it really never looked in my direction, at least not while I was watching it. Once it was gone behind the trees, I didn't see it again that night, and at least so far, I've never seen it with my eyes ever again. I have heard it though. In fact, I hear it frequently now. I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you that I stopped watching TV after that night, but I don't watch every night anymore, and I no longer care if I'm not up on the water cooler TV shows. I've discovered I can let my coworkers discuss spoilers all they want. I can hear about the shows from them. It's their appreciation or dislike of the programs that was always more interesting to me anyway. I still watch TV sometimes, but I also spend other nights staring out the dark windows of my home, wondering if I ever again will be given another chance to see that creature. The next time something happens to you that you think at the time is bad, give it a chance to turn into something good and special for you. After all, I only noticed Dogman because my TV broke. Hey, it's me, Henry Lee Dogman, here to thank those of you who support all of us here at Scary Stories NYC. It really helps us if you click like and if you forward our videos or leave cool comments. If you can, it helps us even more when you let us share our 25 episode and growing collection of uncensored, scary Dogman stories with you by becoming a paid subscriber at peterbernard.com. That's right, join our monthly club and get 25 stories right off the bat, each of them wilder than what we're allowed to tell you on this channel. Then, each Sunday, get another new scary story, usually a Dogman story, but always uncensored and secret, available nowhere else on the planet. Please consider joining us today at peterbernard.com and keep the scary stories coming. Thanks, everyone.
Come back for more scary stories.